Welcome to the C-Suite Series presented by Channelchek and Noble Capital Markets. Noble is an SEC-registered, FINRA-licensed broker-dealer and the source of the equity research available on Channelchek. Of the 6,000 small and microcap companies listed on the site, today we're featuring Energy Fuels. Mark Reichman, Noble's senior research analyst covering the company, will be interviewing CEO Mark Chalmers. Afterwards, he will be joined by Michael Kopinski, Noble's Director of Research, to discuss the key takeaways. As a reminder, Mark's research is available at no cost on Channelchek. Just type in Energy Fuels in the top left Company Data section. And now, here's Mark and Mark.
Welcome, Mark.
Well, it's good to be here, Mark.
Mark, would you please share a little about your background and what brought you to Energy Fuels?
Yeah, certainly. Well, it's a long story, but I'll try to make it fairly short. I started as a miner in the Four Corners region of the United States back in the 70s, okay? And I started as a miner, and I didn't realize that 40-some years later, I'd still be in the Four Corners region of the United States. But I was very familiar with many of the assets that the company has because I had either worked them or worked for the original Energy Fuels. There was a private Energy Fuels, very active in uranium in the 70s and 80s. I went off to other parts of the world, and the opportunity came up to come back to the public company Energy Fuels, and I grabbed it because I thought it was best positioned of all the uranium plays in the entire world in an improved uranium market.
What about the other members of your team, and how does their experience enhance the company's probability of success?
Well, I think they enhance it a lot. I mean, most people don't understand that uranium mining is very tricky business, and experience makes all the difference in the world. Most uranium projects fail. A lot of them will fail. If you look at the statistics, they either fail completely or they deliver on their production, or their costs are too high. So look we have basically a full suite of professionals that have decades of experience in situ recovery and in underground mining, in conventional processing, whatnot, and with that experience, they know how to recover uranium. And so we are a much lower risk company when it comes to production technical risk than most companies out there because they've never done it before.
For investors that may be unfamiliar, would you provide a brief thumbnail sketch of your company?
Yeah, first and foremost, we are a uranium company, and that is our main focus. But we're broader than that. We have a very diversified business model, both with the ability and history of producing vanadium as well. Plus, we've over decades, the assets have recovered and recycled uranium, natural uranium from other sources, not just mining. And now we're emerging into rare earths. So it's a bit complicated, and I think we don't get properly differentiated for some of these other businesses that we have. So it's hard for people to get their head around. It's easy if you're a 100% uranium only company, but it's difficult when you say, well, you do uranium, vanadium, and hopefully soon to be rare earths processing.
What is the state of the uranium market, and how are efforts going to persuade Washington, D.C. that domestic producers have suffered from unfair trade practices?
Well, look, the state of the industry is I think it's improved somewhat. The supply-demand imbalances are shaking out, mainly because of the reductions of production because of costs and COVID. I think that the recognition of the importance of nuclear power in the world is improving. And I think that's helpful. And I think that also that the American public and the U.S. government is really recognizing, particularly post-COVID or during hopefully the tail end of COVID, that we are overly dependent on countries like Russia and China and other state-owned enterprises. So I think it's improving. That's been the million-dollar question for a number of years, Mark. I'm sure you'll agree to that. Is when is it going to, the scale's going to tip? But I think we're getting a lot closer than we were 5 years ago.
Well, now, in terms of the U.S. Nuclear Fuel Working Group recommendations, which came out earlier in the year, how is Energy Fuels positioned relative to other domestic producers in supporting the working group's goals?
Look, I think, firstly, we were the largest drivers of the government initiatives in D.C. I think we're best positioned because of the fact we have a number of assets that are fully permitted, fully constructed, and proven, ready to go. We also have the only conventional operable uranium mill in the United States, and that puts us at an advantage with conventional assets. So, I think that, we just have a track record here. And in the United States over the last 15 years, two companies that produce 85% of the newly mined uranium, processed uranium, over the last 15 years, and it was Cameco and it was Energy Fuels. Cameco produced 50% of the uranium, and Energy Fuels produced 35% of that uranium. So 85% came from two companies. So we believe that puts us in a great position.
Well, nuclear is a carbon-free source of electricity, and in terms of watts per square meter, has a smaller footprint than some renewables, including wind farms. Do you see policymakers beginning to recognize the benefits of conventional nuclear and advanced nuclear technologies and their role in the future of energy?
Absolutely. I didn't ever think in my career that I thought that I would ever think that the uranium and nuclear industry would be gaining prominence over other energy sources that are carbon emissions generating, coal, oil, and gas. I think people are realizing that we need carbon-free energy, baseload energy, and nuclear, and particularly new nuclear. When you start looking at things like the small modular reactors, are really starting to get some traction. You're seeing small modular reactors, at least designs coming up all over the world. In United States, Canada, and Russia, and China. And I think it's a game changer because they will be modularly constructed. They will be more incremental. They won't be the big units that you traditionally see in the past. And I think the recognition of the applications of nuclear and the safety record of nuclear, which is extraordinary, can only get better with the new technologies and the small modular reactors.
Now, most investors perceive Energy Fuels as a uranium play, and you mentioned that you broadened your portfolio to include vanadium. What did you learn from that?
Well, look, we have a long history of producing vanadium. It's always been on a campaign basis. I think the thing we learned is that we got some of our younger metallurgists that had never ran the vanadium circuit themselves, and they were able to get the circuit running effectively. The mill that was built in 1980, it has both a uranium and a vanadium circuit in the mill, so it's not new to us. But it was sort of an experiment for us because we looked at some different processing approaches, but we also looked at some new ways of mining using handheld XRFs that give us more control underground in the mines for getting higher grade vanadium ores with the XRFs that did not exist 20, 30 years ago, but now do.
I think it was a real testament to the versatility and flexibility of the White Mesa Mill. Now, would you discuss your company's decision to broaden your portfolio to include rare earth minerals?
Yeah, absolutely. I think rare earths fits absolutely uniquely into our business plan. And the main reason is that many rare earths contain uranium, which is a problem for a number of people that want to recover the rare earths, but it is our core business. So it's an opportunity for us. Currently, and it's only been happening for, the CNNC in China is currently recovering uranium and rare earths from monazite materials that are both high in uranium and thorium and other radioactive materials and rare earths. And we basically are proposing to do the exact same thing as CNNC. So it's being done currently. It's proven, and White Mesa Mill, with its long history of over nearly 40 years of uranium production, successful history of extraction, what would be a better fit? We have the tailings facilities, we have the licenses, we have a lot of the equipment, we have people that have the skill sets, we got the laboratories, the reagents. This is a unique place for our company, and it is a unique place for the rare earths industry in the entire world. We're still early days here, but watch this space, and I think we're going to surprise people substantially on the upside in the coming year or in the coming several months out or a few months out.
Just to expand on it a little bit, could you maybe talk a little bit about the applications for these rare earth elements, and also what the key components of your strategy will be in terms of sourcing and marketing the concentrate or the elements themselves if you choose to recover and separate?
Yeah, look at the first plank of our business plan here is to be a processing center, and using the White Mesa Mill that has the ability to handle these ore streams that have uranium in them, as I mentioned, to extract the uranium and have the facilities to deal with that. At the moment, we're not planning to be a miner per se. We're going to look at, in the first instance, these heavy mineral sands operations that produce this monazite sort of concentrated material. And it varies in concentrations of total rare earths between probably 20% up to 70%. So it's very high grade, and we think that again, because of the high grade, it has high value. It can be transported a long distance. Our goal initially is to make a uranium-free concentrate that has, sort of in the order of 50% total rare earths, very high distribution towards the heavies and the magnetic type rare earths. And then after we start making a concentrate, we'll start looking at other steps in the separation process after that. But we're going to take it in simple steps, and we think that there are sources of monazite out there that exist. Much of that is already going to China. A lot of these people that are sending this material to China would rather send it someplace else. And why not send it to White Mesa in the United States, where we can reestablish the processing of rare earths in the country in a material way? So, this is Mark, I've talked to you about this before. In the period of my career over 40 years, I believe this is one of the best opportunities I've ever come upon in my career. And I am excited that we're in the box seat here. We still have things to do, but not a lot of things to do relative to our peers that are starting from scratch. Many have been in the business for 10 or 15 years and have never commercially produced anything. And I believe we'll be commercially producing a concentrate within the next 12 months.
Well, Mark, we have an election coming up, and what do you think the key issues are that each political party should be considering when it comes to, the uranium industry and critical minerals in general?
Well, again, historically, the Republicans have been more supportive of nuclear power, but that's changing with particularly the small modular reactors and the progress being made on those fronts. I think the necessity of the carbon-free energy, as I said earlier, is becoming more front and center. I haven't heard any real negatives from the Democrats about nuclear power as an ongoing energy source. And actually, they've made some positive comments about some of the new technologies with nuclear. And I think the same thing goes on the Republican side when it comes to nuclear, and the fact that we were once the leader in nuclear technologies in the world, and we've been losing our place there for a number of years. The critical minerals, when you add the vanadium and the rare earths, it's every day you see something new. And actually, rare earths are getting more attention than I think than nuclear and uranium, certainly vanadium. So I think that the lessons learned for both parties is we're overly dependent on a lot of these materials, and we cannot be overly dependent. And I think, we as a company in this critical mineral hub concept that we're trying to build is uniquely placed in a bipartisan way. And again, that excites me. I'm glad we can add this extra spoke or wheel called rare earths to that positioning.
Now, how would you characterize the company's financial strength and liquidity?
Look, I think very good compared to our peers. We trade probably 2 million shares a day, so that's $3 to $4 million a day in trading. We've been paying off some of our debt. We still have, in the order of around $50 million of cash or working capital. A big chunk of that is inventory of saleable uranium and vanadium, depending on what price you pick and the quantities. That's in the order of $30 million of inventory that is saleable, quickly. We are still doing everything possible to reduce our cash burn. We are also looking at divestment of a few of our non-core assets that we think can generate substantial funds to the company, both in cash and shares, if that's successful. But we're also focused very much on getting to a cash flow positive position as quickly as possible. Right now, cash flow could come from really, divestment of some of these assets and the rare earths, and support with uranium prices or support from the government on the uranium front. So we're very focused on getting to cash flow as quick as possible. And I don't think there's any other company in the space that, when you look at our balance sheet, our inventory, the diversification we have between these different materials, that's in a better position than we are with the assets that we have, not just in the United States, but around the world in that kind of sector that we operate in. I think we are uniquely placed there. And I think that many of our peers are envious of the position we have. We just have to get a few of these things to come together to get the traction to show what we can do as a company going forward.
Mark, thank you for joining us today.
It's my pleasure, Mark. I'm always happy and excited to talk about Energy Fuels and the uniqueness of our company and where it can fit in to this uranium critical mineral space. Thank you very much.
Mark, thanks for bringing this management team to us. It was a fascinating discussion. I learned a lot. It was news to me that the nuclear actually has a lower carbon footprint than wind farms. And I was just wondering, why do you think the U.S. has not developed more nuclear power? It just seems like that would be an opportunity for this company.
Well, I think the main objections to nuclear are really threefold. The first is the issue of the radioactive spent fuel and what to do with it and how to dispose of it. The second issue relates to the probability or risk of a nuclear meltdown, like, for example, the 3 Mile Island that happened in the 1970s. There just are many communities that don't want a nuclear plant in their backyard. and there's just real, for some, even the smallest risk of a meltdown is reason, not to support nuclear. But there are a lot of policymakers now that are looking at really reimagining the industry in terms of maybe not having these large-scale nuclear plants, but try to support micro reactors or small modular reactors. There's still a lot of work going on about trying to reduce the amount of radioactive spent fuel. So I think that there are solutions to a lot, to overcome a lot of these objections. But I think the key is that, for some of the goals that a lot of the policymakers would like to reach in terms of climate goals, I think that it would be hard to reach it just depending on renewables. And so I think nuclear kind of fits nicely into the picture. And in terms of safety, when you think about it, they do have a very strong safety record. So I think you could see support for nuclear grow over time.
And the company's development of rare earth minerals seems like a great opportunity. What is your take on the company's move into this area, and how do you place value on that opportunity?
Well, I think their movement into the rare earth area, I think, kind of underscored the versatility and the flexibility of the White Mesa mill, because while their core business is really uranium or producing uranium concentrates, they are able to produce like vanadium, and now they're looking at processing ores that contain rare earth that to produce a rare earth concentrate that could be sold to separate out and recover the rare earth elements. It's still very nascent in their strategy. I think it's a good extension of their business, and certainly they're trying to position themselves as kind of a player in the critical minerals supply chain, for the United States. In terms of how you value it, I think it's really, there's only one White Mesa mill, and are they producing, are they producing uranium versus vanadium versus these rare earth concentrates? It's all, I think what it really does is it provides them a lot more flexibility and the ability to be opportunistic depending on the price of those various commodities. But right now, we're not placing a lot of value on that particular strategy just because it's still too early, and there's a lot to develop there in terms of where they're going to source the ores and what the end markets will look like, and most importantly, the economics of that business to Energy Fuels.
And Mark mentioned that there are plans to sell some assets, and I was wondering if you had a thought about how much those assets could be worth, and could the sale of those assets help the stock valuation?
Well, I think that when you look at their balance sheet and their liquidity, I think they're in pretty good shape, for the near term. They have issued a fair amount of equity under their at-the-market equity issuance program. And so I think this would be another source of liquidity for them, in addition to the inventories of uranium and vanadium that they've built up that they could sell. In terms of the actual value, we haven't actually put a value, an asset value on because they really haven't disclosed, which assets they're interested in selling and under what arrangements. I mean, I think we have a pretty good idea, but I think directionally, I think it could help, because I think that would maybe allay the market's concern about further dilution under these ATM equity programs. As with any M&A transaction, or it would kind of put a value, that investors might associate with the remainder of their portfolio. So I think it would probably be helpful, and I think also the fact that I think it's really a kind of an elegant solution, because in many cases they would be selling assets to someone else that would, turn around and enter into a milling contract with Energy Fuels, where they would be processing those ores. So I think it would probably be a win-win type of transaction for any party, to do business with Energy Fuels. So yes, I think it would be a positive development.
Great, Mark. Well, thanks for bringing the management to us. I thought it was a great interview. Thank you.
Thank you, Michael.